Security Weekly, I am your host, Matt Alderman. We are recording live at RSAC Conference 2020. It's day 2, it's Tuesday. We're in Broadcast Alley. This interview is with Mark Ralls, President and Chief Operating Officer of Acunetix. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Really happy to be here.
Kind of an interesting place to do an interview.
Yes.
If you haven't done it before, the keynotes are off to our left as we sit here today, so traffic kind of coming back and forth, so it's a lot of fun here.
That's right.
We're going to talk a little bit about automation.
Yes.
From a web app security perspective.
Of course.
Right? And also focus on the SMB. So let's start with, what is the web app security challenge for SMBs?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this is something that we obviously think a lot about. Acunetix, this has been our entire focus for our history, right? So 15-year-old company, web app security from the beginning. It's all we do. Really... we're seeing kind of great growth and great impact in our customers. And what we've noticed in talking to a lot of our SMB customers is just how big a challenge they face in just considering web app security. And so, as you know, there's a huge gap and skill gap in terms of hiring and being able to find the right people. And it's even worse if you're an SMB and you're looking at a security team of 1 or a security team of 2.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know who to hire? How do you find the right people? And then really, how do you bring in someone who's really high quality, where you're telling them, like, security is your job, but by the way, if the Wi-Fi goes down, people are probably going to call you about that too, right? And so it's not really that kind of exciting, cutting edge, all the time security role that you might find at a larger enterprise.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge is when we think about security, people think about applications and web app security kind of last sometimes, right? We focus so much, we were talking about this right before the interview segment, a lot of solutions focus at the network and the endpoint layer.
That's right.
So a lot of people are, deploying firewalls and IDSs, maybe some packet capture technologies. They're doing a lot of scanning on their endpoint devices. And we forget about that application layer, right? And so my guess is in an SMB, priority of web app security, even if you have the resources, which are hard, web app is still way further down the plate for most of these organizations. Do you see that as well?
No, we see that, and it's a little bit of a head scratcher for us, I think, because if you're an SMB today, in 2020, you're probably on G Suite or O365.
Yeah.
Yep. You're probably not using an old school Microsoft file share, right? You're probably on Box or Drive or OneDrive or whatever it is. Maybe you're on Salesforce or Dynamics or some other CRM, and all of your applications or anything that's customer facing is either provided by a third-party software firm that you're working with, or you're hosting on AWS or Azure, Google, and so it's kind of like, well, where is the network, guys? Like, why are you
Why are you still focused there?
Exactly. I mean, in our Austin office, we've got 50 people in the office, and we have there is no network. There's internet access.
So when I wrote, Paul and I worked together at Tenable, and when I wrote the 5-year strat plan, I drew a picture. And the picture was an office with a Wi-Fi router in it, and everything else is in the cloud.
Exactly. And that's what we live. I mean, that's exactly what we live in. Our, we have our large office in Malta. A lot of where our dev happens and everything else, and they have a small network, but even that network we've been chopping away, and more of that's in the cloud. And the fact is that really anything that matters is in the cloud now. Nothing in our server room in Malta, nothing that mission critical is in that room.
Right.
Everything mission critical is at AWS.
Yep.
And so more and more SMBs look like that and follow that model. And there's a lot of focus on endpoints still, and there should be, right? I mean,
to an extent, yeah.
Yeah, and you want to have antivirus, anti-malware. You want to protect against phishing, kind of all of those standard vectors. But the fact is that some of your biggest, reputational risk is going to come if a customer-facing application is hacked or exposed.
Right.
And then you're in the situation of going to your customers and saying, hey, your data was exposed. A lot of the if you just were to read, the headlines that hit CNN or Wall Street Journal or whatever, ransomware is everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. But you start to look at a lot of the breaches that occurred in 2019, and a lot of them, a shocking number of them, are back-end databases exposed to their web application.
Yeah.
And
misconfigured S3 bucket, exposes a bunch of data.
Exactly.
So I agree with you 100%. I've always said app user data survives the cloud revolution because I still own the application in some respects. I mean, I might do some SaaS, but I still have to do some of the configuration and make sure that environment's secured. It's identity, who has access to those applications and what level. And then obviously it's always been about data.
That's right.
I mean, hackers go after data all the time. So if I'm a small to medium business and I want to address web app security, how do they approach it, right? In an effective way, knowing that there is a skills gap for them and maybe a knowledge gap a little bit with web app security. So how do they approach this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for any business and anyone who's going through this journey, I mean, you have to start by knowing what you don't know, right? And start with, you've got to start somewhere, and typically that's going to be, working with some sort of, provider, pen testing firm, consulting firm that's going to be able to come in and do an assessment and say, okay, here are where your gaps are, here's where your risks are, your website's hosted on WordPress, and you've got these plugins, and they're out of date.
Yes, we do.
Exactly. Chances are, if you have WordPress plugins, they are out of date.
Probably.
That tends to be what we see a lot, and so, and that's a good starting point. But, and if you go back 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, at the end of the day, and if you're an SMB, and I was at a small software company that was selling into, nonprofits, 3 years ago, and we would respond to RFIs or RFPs and, hey, have you done your annual pen test? Check, yes, we have. Right. And that was kind of, the standard then. That can't be the standard now. So you do that one-time assessment, you get some expertise in, but the fact is that the web app security tools have gotten so good and so user-friendly, at least a subset of them, of which I like to think Acunetix is one. There are others. Have gotten so good and so user-friendly that now it really becomes how do you take that expert advice that you get and that kind of level set. Here's where you are. You've now filled in kind of what you don't know, and now you have to go in and execute and address those vulnerabilities, update those WordPress plugins, kind of whatever the case may be. But I don't think any small business owner, and again, we get back to those reputation risks of a customer-facing breach, no one should be satisfied with checking the box once a year. That's just not good enough, right? Or once a quarter. And so that's where we really see people start to say, okay, I've done an assessment, but now I need to own this. This is my business. No one cares about my business like I do.
I need to continually monitor this environment.
Right. And so I need scheduled scans, and I need alerts on the latest, hey, this the latest vulnerability for a given plugin, or I install a new plugin. My marketing team is always changing things and always chasing the shiny object. What risk did they create yesterday? Right. And so by having those automated scans, automated alerts, from a web app testing software, you're always protected, or at least you always know where your vulnerabilities are. Right. And you can always go and address them.
And you bring up a really good point. The early tools in this space, and we know who they are, required a lot of expertise to run them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
You needed the expert behind the keyboard interacting with the application to really get a good understanding of the web app vulnerabilities.
That's right.
We fast forward now 15 plus years. Well, tools have gotten a lot better, right? And they're a lot more user-friendly and don't necessarily need the same level of expertise. And if you can do that effectively, it allows you to continually monitor the environment for change, for new vulnerabilities, for outdated software plugins, and make it really easy. What's that frequency? What should that frequency look like? It's not once a year, right? No. But what is kind of an acceptable frequency, especially for the SMBs? I mean, look, this isn't Etsy where they're making changes every 7 minutes in production, right? Okay, so you probably don't need to do it that often. But what do you see as that kind of that cadence for SMBs to really get into a rhythm for this automation? Yeah,
we're really frequently seeing companies with a frequency in that kind of weekly, that weekly cadence, right? So that because again, someone standing up a new marketing microsite, that doesn't happen every day, but it may happen, more frequently than you think, right? And so it only takes a limited amount of exposure, right? A limited window, to create a lot of risk and to create a lot of negative downside. And so, weekly seems to be a good cadence, something that people can absorb. And I think one of the things that we've addressed And this is the benefit of being a company like Acunetix, where we do sell to the enterprise and we also sell to the SMB, is we'll have customers that say, hey, we've got 500 developers. And any given developer needs to be able to receive an alert, understand what that alert is, and to be able to address it if they created that vulnerability. And so we've had to make the product so user-friendly that we can't individually train 500 people, right? 500 developers. And so it's got to be user-friendly enough that an individual developer can get an alert, can understand it, and can take action, which means that that's perfect for the SMB, right? Because we are building for that person that doesn't have time to do hours and hours and hours of training.
Right.
They need to be able to get something out of the, get a result and say, okay, here's where my issue is, right? Here's what my concern is. And then the other thing that we've done, really focused on the SMB, and this is something new with our V13 launch that we just announced a few weeks ago, and is now kind of out there in the wild, is we have built-in network scanning and we have built-in anti-malware. And so as you start to think as an SMB and say, hey, look, I need, yes, I need security. Yes, I understand web application security is important, but I also want to have a limited number of applications that I'm logging into and dealing with. We've tried to really take that to heart and do what is best for our SMB customers and say, okay, well, great. Let's build in these adjacencies so that you do have that more of that one-stop shop.
Yeah, because I think it's difficult for them. I think the average, I've heard various averages, but in an enterprise, there's 50, 75, maybe even 100 different security tools. SMBs don't have the staff to run that many tools.
Yeah.
I mean,
or the budget.
Or the budget or anything else. Yep. And so I think where vendors in the SMB space can really help is providing more capabilities.
That's right.
Right? And so if you can roll in some other features, make it a little easier minimize the number of vendors, but also the number of integration touch points, because that gets really difficult for the SMBs.
Yep, and the number of alerts. Yeah, the number of alerts received. Yeah, exactly. And that's and I think that that's been a big focus of ours. But it's those things that are logical, right? That are logical adjacencies. We're not trying to get outside of our area of expertise and our comfort zone. We want to do things where we can deliver really high quality, scanning, monitoring, alerting. And on that note, one of the other things that we've really focused on as part of this V13 launch is also verifying the vulnerabilities that we do find. And so making sure that we're not creating hundreds of false positives. We're not creating a kind of application that cried wolf scenario where your limited IT resources, your small dev team is just starts to ignore these things or create that email filter, if it's from this app, just send that to this folder and mark it as red.
Trash,
exactly.
Whatever,
yeah, exactly. We want to make sure that those really are, if we're alerting you to something, it's valid and you need to take action. And so starting to really verify vulnerabilities in those V13 results, which is also, our customers that are already using that V13 instance are saying is phenomenal and really just cuts through the noise and allows provides that just crystal clear signal of what they need to go after and handle.
That's good. I think alert fatigue and false positive alert fatigue will definitely hurt you in a small to medium business that just doesn't have the resources.
You shouldn't pay. Yeah, you shouldn't. Your and I know this. I live this. I manage to a budget, right? Your budget dollars are too critical, no matter how big your budget is, to spend it on a tool your team is ignoring.
Yeah, true.
Right.
Don't want to turn into shelfware.
Absolutely.
Any other announcements for RSA?
I think those are the big ones. I mean,
V13 was the big.
The V13 is a big deal.
Yeah,
exactly. We did a couple of weeks ago, and again, we're seeing really great uptake and really great response there. Customers have been really pleased. Fortunately, we have not seen it's a high quality release. There's no spike in support ticket volume, so people can feel good about that upgrade. And then we've got our booth in the north side of the expo and getting a lot of good foot traffic. I was there yesterday for the opening.
Yeah, for the opening. And there will probably be a lot when you get out of here.
That's
because as the keynotes kind of let out, everybody's going to go over and see the expo hall. So
absolutely.
With that, thank you very much. I don't want to hold you up anymore.
Of course.
Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks, Matt.